Hey everybody, and welcome back to another severe storm thermal weather forecast. In this forecast, we have a very active weather pattern we're going to be getting into as we head in towards the next 7 days, including rounds of severe thunderstorms. So let's get right into it. Without further ado, taking a look at our jet stream across the United States. As we head into tomorrow, we're likely going to be watching for a really strong piece of energy to form in the northern plains and upper Midwest and kind of dive through portions of the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley. That could form a mesoscale convective system across this area, capable of producing widespread damaging winds and maybe the possibility of a few spin-up tornadoes. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on there. We'll also need to keep an eye on this piece of energy, mainly due to the fact that we'll likely have this ridge set up, and we like to call this pattern the ring of fire. So any piece of energy that likes to ride along the northern and western and eastern periphery of this will have the possibility of producing severe weather, and it will likely dive southeast into portions of the Ohio Valley. And look at this, it does as we head into the daytime hours on Sunday. There it is, diving through portions of the Ohio Valley. This could be an MCS threat across portions of Indiana and parts of Ohio, parts of West Virginia, as well as parts of Pennsylvania. We'll also need to watch out for maybe some sort of threat of severe weather with this this mesoscale convective vortex as we head in towards that time frame. And then as we take it into early next week, Monday, July 21st, like I said before, we're going to set up this pattern where we have, pieces of energy. Like there's one right here, there's another one right here, and those will likely want to dive southeast along the periphery of this ridge. All right, so we need to watch anywhere where I put the arrow as we head into the daytime hours on Monday. First, the northern plains, and then likely diving through portions of the upper Midwest and Ohio Valley, all right? And notice what happens as we head into the daytime hours on Tuesday. We get another piece of energy to kind of form in the upper Midwest, and it's likely going to dive through portions of the Great Lakes region and possibly even the Mid-Atlantic. Does it stay sustained? That's going to be a big question mark, but I definitely think there's a possibility for something to form here and something to really kind of just cascade down into portions of the Mid-Atlantic. We'll also need to watch out for maybe a frontal boundary across portions of the northern plains as well as the upper Midwest, with significant severe weather being a possibility across portions of the northern plains and upper Midwest regions. Monsoonal moisture will likely continue to promote those daily scattered thunderstorm chances down there. And then as we head into the day on Wednesday, like I said before, it's a continued threat. We'll have a piece of energy here, we'll have a piece of energy here. Both of those will want to dive along this ridge. This one right here and this one likely right here, likely diving southeast and kind of cascading through the Great Lakes region. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on as we head in towards that Wednesday time frame. And then as we head in towards Thursday, we will likely continue to see these areas of energy. Like there's one right here. It's not that, that strong since it's a bit further out. But look at this. I mean, we could likely see something cascading along the periphery of this ridge. Where that is highly uncertain. It will all depend on the northern extension of this ridge. But I definitely think it's possible we do continue to see pieces of energy kind of just forming into this area and kind of just cascading into these areas, all right? Like forming up here and then kind of just cascading all the way across portions of the Mid-Atlantic. So that's definitely threats I'm going to be keeping very close eyes on as we head in towards much of next week. And here's another example as we head into Friday. Notice here several pieces of energy. Those will likely dive somewhere into portions of this area with several days of severe weather expected. And taking a look at your precipitation trends over the course of the next week, notice here, again, like I said before, we're going to continue to watch this area for the possibility of some storm complex development. As we head throughout the rest of the evening, we also have this piece of energy that continues to produce severe weather, including a complex and several clusters of thunderstorms across this area. We also have areas of isolated thunderstorm activity and severe weather activity at times across the monsoonal areas. And then as we take it, again, like I said before, into the daytime hours tomorrow, this is what I was talking about, folks. Like I said, the piece of energy right here, here's your complex of thunderstorms through Ohio, southern Michigan, back into portions of Kentucky. This is going to be ripping through these areas tomorrow evening, folks, so definitely want to stay weather aware. Again, like I said before, we'll likely have another piece of energy on the back side of this, and that's going to likely dive southeast for the daytime hours, like I said before, on Sunday. And notice here how it completely does that as we head in towards that time frame. Here's your next mesoscale convective system as we head in towards that time frame. And like I said before, any piece of energy up here will likely be capable of producing at least isolated severe weather as we head in towards that time frame. And then Monday, we kind of get a cold front to drape itself across portions of the northern plains, and that's something I'm concerned about, all right? We're likely going to have like I said before, a frontal boundary drape like this, and we're likely also going to have your ridge right here. So we're likely going to be dealing with maybe some ridge rider situations across this circle region. So that's something to really keep an eye on as we head towards that time frame. Otherwise, we're looking at the possibility again of, like I said, clusters of thunderstorms that will likely kind of just ride and cascade around this high pressure system as we head in towards that time frame. And Tuesday is another good example of that potential as we head in towards this time frame. I mean, like I said before, here's another one right here that's likely going to cascade through Ohio back into portions of the mid-Atlantic, and we are likely going to see just several repetitive rounds of showers and thunderstorms across Arizona all the way into portions of Wyoming. We also have an area of low pressure here. Does that go tropical? That's going to be something to keep a very close eye on. Bottom line, though, the severe weather threats will definitely be the main concern as we head in towards next week, because look at this. Wednesday, here's another piece of energy here. Here's another piece of energy here. Those are all going to ride around this ridge, kind of cascading down in the same trajectory on the periphery of that ridge, right into these areas across portions of, the Ohio Valley, back into portions of the mid-Atlantic. Definitely want to watch if I just circled you. And then as I head into the daytime hours on Thursday, like I said before, repetitive rounds of showers and thunderstorms, including mesoscale convective systems, will be a possibility as we head in towards this time frame. And then going into the daytime hours on Friday, this is when things start to get a bit more significant per se, as we will likely have a bit more of a 500 millibar wind jet streak across portions of the Midwest and Ohio Valley. So that could serve maybe a significant threat of damaging wind gusts as we head in towards that time frame for these areas. So definitely want to keep an eye on that as we head in towards next week as well. And taking a look now at our heat-related concerns as we head in towards next week with this. Taking it in towards tomorrow, look at this, folks. Heat indexes in the triple digits and 90s, anywhere from the Central Plains back into portions of the southeastern and southwestern United States, where several areas could experience heat indexes at or above 100. And then as we take it into the daytime hours there on Sunday, as that ridge continues to amplify itself, notice here, especially Sunday evening, notice here it's showing upwards of 105 degree heat indexes across those areas. But anywhere where I circle will at least have a possibility of some significant heat related activity as we head in towards that time frame. And then as we head into the daytime hours there on Monday, look at these heat indexes, folks. All right, I mean, look at this. You're talking about 90s and triple digits as far north as the Dakotas region, dropping back into portions of the Carolinas, back into portions of the Southeast. I mean, this is a big corridor where we could have some significant heat-related illnesses and significant record-breaking heat as we head in towards early next week. And it doesn't get better from there, folks, all right? Like I said, Tuesday, we're likely going to have this ridge pretty much at its peak as we head in towards that time frame. And notice here, like I said before, triple digit heat indexes. I mean, 90s surrounding that, but this is your area of greatest concern, all right, where I could exceed maybe extreme heat warnings to include that potential across those areas, all right? So definitely want to take things seriously if you live in those areas, which I think a lot of people do. But as we head in towards Wednesday, I mean, like I said before, we're likely going to continue to see this area of high pressure, and this is your area where I could see, again, like I said before, maybe some excessive heat warnings across this area. Like anywhere in the second circle region, though, is where I expect the possibility of heat indexes at or above 105. All right, so this narrow corridor here from Texas back up all the way into portions of, the lower Midwest region and the Corn Belt. I mean, this is going to be something significant as we head in towards that time frame. And Thursday, the heat continues across the United States with several areas at or above 100 degrees for feel-like temperatures, with all this mugginess, especially in the Corn Belt regions, where we could see heat indexes, again, like I said before, exceeding 105. And then as we head into the daytime hours there on Friday, obviously, the placement of the ridge will determine the widespreadness of these triple-digit heat indexes. But, I mean, like I said before, it's going to be pretty much a decent area where we have these, these significant heat indexes. And it's pretty much going to be along a trajectory like this, all right? Even the upper 90s feel like temperatures can be hot for some. So I'm going to circle pretty much the entirety of this area, because this is where I expect to see at least 90-degree heat indexes or above. And then in the second circle region, like I said before, areas where I expect the possibility of the hottest temperatures and possibly record-breaking temperatures exceeding 100 degrees for feel-like temperatures. And timing out our near-term severe weather threats over the course of the next 48 hours, let's start with tonight's severe weather threat, which is extending across portions of southern Minnesota to central Minnesota, with the possibility of some tornadic circulation, some large hail, as well as maybe even a broken complex of storms trying to get going here. And I can confirm that is happening on radar, so this model is definitely good for looking at storm coverage, all right? Just don't let the intensity get the best of your mind, all right? Because I know that can get the best of pretty much everyone's mind, especially if you love thunderstorms. But taking a look here as we head in towards around, the 10 p.m. hour, notice here we have thunderstorms clustering up across portions of southern Minnesota. Those will be capable of producing all hazards, including damaging winds, large hail, and the possibility of tornadoes. And then as we head in towards around the 2 a.m. EDT hour or 1 a.m. CDT hour, notice here we will likely have several clusters or maybe even supercells of thunderstorms extending from southern Minnesota back into portions of southern South Dakota, which will likely be capable of all hazards, including the possibility for 1 or 2 stronger tornadoes across portions of Iowa. And then as we take it in towards, the early morning dawn hours of tomorrow, like 5 a.m., 6 a.m., time frame, we start to develop this into a bit of a thunderstorm complex, all right? Is this totally severe? It might not be, it might not be, or it might not be, but I definitely think this is going to be producing some very potent rainfall rates, and this is likely going to be a concern for some flooding issues. But you'll also notice here the little bit of a bowing nature of some of these thunderstorms, all right? This is outflow driven according to this model. If this were to happen, we could have damaging winds across this area tomorrow morning, pretty much widespread from northern Nebraska back into portions of Minnesota. So definitely something to keep an eye on as we head in towards that time frame. Another area to watch is the area of possible clustered up storms across portions of central Iowa, which will likely be capable of all hazards tomorrow morning as well. And then as we take it in towards the 9 and 10 a.m. hour across this area, we just have a full-blown complex of thunderstorms with several embedded tornado potential as we head in towards this time frame as well. Damaging winds will be the primary threat, but like I said before, large hail and tornadoes will definitely still be a possibility in my opinion. And around the noontime hours tomorrow, notice here we just have this nasty bowing segment racing across portions of Iowa, dropping into Illinois probably around the noontime hour. They're specifically talking about the northwesternmost corner of Illinois, racing across portions of the Chicago area around that 4 p.m. time frame. Notice here we continue to see the bowing nature of this line. That's definitely something to really worth noting. And notice here we also have a bowing segment across portions of western Michigan. If this were to pan out this way, we would likely have several wind damage reports along this line. And that's why I think we could also have a derecho that starts off across portions of Iowa and kind of just drops southeast through the rest of tomorrow evening, all right? We'll see what happens because, of course, these models can get things wrong. but it typically has a good handle on storm mode as well as storm coverage. All right, so RRFS is your go-to for that. When you're looking at for intensity, don't look at this model. All right, when you're looking at intensity, look at the NAM 3KM or even HRRR. All right, that'll give you much better intensity readings. But if you want to look at storm mode, storm coverage, look at the RRFS because that is your go-to. And I mean, definitely as we head towards, the latter part of tomorrow afternoon, like I said before, like the 6-7 p.m. hour around dinner time, we just have this continued mesoscale convective system producing widespread damaging winds along this boundary. Do we see a little bit of a broken off cluster across southern Illinois? That is going to be something to keep an eye on, but we certainly are likely going to have several significant gusts along the leading edge of this boundary. We'll also need to watch out for maybe some prefrontals ahead of that across portions of Ohio, and we'll also need to not discredit the cells across portions there of central Michigan before this line starts to blast across portions of Ohio, with significant damaging winds being a possibility, as well as the possibility for some prefrontals producing large hail, as well as maybe an isolated tornado threat. And then taking it in towards the early morning hours of Sunday, this mesoscale convective system or even possible derecho should wane itself as we head in towards the early morning hours of Sunday, but we'll likely begin to watch for new convection to pop across portions of Iowa, possibly across portions of eastern Nebraska as well. And then as we take it in towards the later part of Sunday morning, this is when we maybe will have to watch for maybe a Boeing segment or even maybe just a cluster of thunderstorms producing large hail damaging winds and the possibility of a tornado across portions of South Dakota. We'll also need to watch out across portions of Iowa. This might be sub-severe. This might be severe. We're just going to have to see what all this MCS does. All right, does it stabilize your atmosphere for that Sunday time frame, or does it leave it open for thunderstorms to blow up? All right, according to this model, it does as we head in towards the late Sunday afternoon time frame. All right, like I said before, don't pay attention to intensity. All right, pay attention to storm mode and storm coverage. All right, because as we head in towards late Sunday, this is showing maybe we have a little bit of a decaying line of showers and thunderstorms across portions of northern Minnesota, southern Iowa, and central Illinois. All right, that's going to be something to keep an eye on there because we could have a damaging or at least a gusty wind threat with that as well. And we'll also need to watch out for maybe some isolated pop-up supercells and maybe some clustering cells as we head in towards that time frame. Overall, the severe weather threat really wings itself down, though, as we head in towards the early part of Monday before we do it all over again in the northern plains as well as the Midwest over the course of the next week or so. And taking a look at your tropical weather outlook for the Atlantic for the next week or so, notice here that the National Hurricane Center has a little bit of a lemon across portions of the central Atlantic basin that could form into something as we head in towards that next week time frame, which could brush up against the southeastern coast, or it could easily go into the Caribbean and significantly strengthen into the Gulf Coast. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on there. Another thing of note is that Invest 93L, or what was supposed to be Dexter that underperformed, is right here, but it's going to do something interesting since we have this area of high pressure here. Instead of kind of just weakening out, it's going to do a loop-de-loop. All right, it's going to do a loop-de-loop around this area of high pressure. All right, the high pressure system's more so right here. I apologize for that. But it's going to do a loop-de-loop around that high pressure system, and it's going to probably affect these areas in the coming days. All right, possibly with, not only flooding rains, but the possibility maybe of tornadoes and severe weather as we head in towards that time frame as well. So definitely something to keep an eye on as we head in towards the middle part of next week, especially before maybe it does something offshore once again, maybe producing something tropical here. We'll have to wait and see on that, but definitely a lot to keep an eye on in terms of the tropics for the next week or so. And thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you, as always, like and subscribe if you're not already. Have a great rest of your night, everybody, and stay safe out there.